Welcome to three of the Republican candidates for the 7th Congressional District. We appreciate you coming in. The incumbent, John Mica, is not here. He is, according to his office, in the Capitol, in the U.S. Capitol today. We'll certainly follow up with him on any issues that are raised today. Whenever we have candidates in, we do background checks on them, and we begin our interviews with a couple of questions to get them out of the way, and then we'll move on to some of the issues. And the first question is, have you ever been arrested? Mr. Smith?
No.
Okay. Mr. Shirley?
No.
Okay. Mr. Oehlrich?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell us the circumstances?
It was when I was in college, and I was breaking up a fight, and then I got arrested.
Okay. And how was that resolved?
Oh, I pleaded no contest. I had to go back to school.
Okay. But there was no jail time associated with that? Okay. And the next question is, have you ever declared bankruptcy, Mr. Smith?
No.
Okay. Mr. Shirley?
No.
Okay.
Boy, yes, again.
When was that? And
That was last year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the real estate industry, and we took a beating after the housing boom and bust, and it was a very, very difficult decision, but we had to do it. We couldn't go into debt anymore. So, and that's also one of the reasons why I'm running, because it had a lot to do with congressional meddling that caused the housing boom and bust.
Well, we may have an opportunity to get into more detail on that. But I want to move on and start with the basic question, and I'll start with you, Mr. Shirley, on this. And that is, why are you running for this office?
I'm running for this office because I believe our government has let us down, and that people in District 7, where I've been working for the past 30 years, have asked me to run.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
I don't think Washington today is serving the people. I don't think Central Florida is being well served by our representative up there today. Central Florida's future is not going to be based upon Central Florida's past. It's time for new energy, new ideas, fresh perspectives to chart a new path for Central Florida. That's why I'm running.
Mr. Oehlrich?
I'm running because there's a lack of leadership in Washington. And as long as we keep electing the same people time after time, we're going to get the same type leadership. And it's this leadership that's allowed us to go into $17 trillion in debt. And it's time to put a halt on that.
Well, Mr. Smith, you were discussing how the past doesn't dictate the future now. What's the most important thing you were trying to accomplish to benefit the district you are running to serve if you were elected to office?
High-tech job growth. We have the opportunity in Central Florida to move away from the mindset of cattle, citrus, tourism is the only things here in Central Florida. We have some great seeds that have been planted in terms of simulation and training, laser technology, manufacturing, some aviation. Those are all my business skill sets. That's the industry I've come from and what I've worked in, but it needs to be taken to a higher level of a more vocal advocate and somebody who understands the business of high-tech industry. High-tech is high-paying, and those higher wage jobs strengthen our communities and families, and we really can move Central Florida out of old sleepy time Florida and into something new and different.
Same question to you, Mr. Shirley.
I think that high-tech jobs are definitely an advocate for Central Florida. I think that we also need to encourage our small businesses to expand and to help young people get out of the situations they're in right now. I think that our economy has really gone so far south, and we have such a sluggish economy that we should, help the small businesses.
Can you, just to follow up on that, can you just tell us 2 or 3 specific policies that you pursue to expand small business?
Well, I think lower the interest rates for small businesses to get started. Encourage small businesses. They need to have an opportunity to come forward, and I think that our young people are out there waiting. That are our millennials. They've been out there waiting for jobs and opportunity.
Wouldn't that require some sort of government intervention, though, for lower loan rates or whatever for small businesses?
I think that might be encouraged for that. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And Mr. Smith, just back to you, that encouraging high tech, what sort of role would government play at the federal level without subsidies? I mean, there are plenty of champions here in town. So what would you do in Congress that wouldn't require tax money, given
Right.
that you're a fiscal conservative?
Right. There's 2 aspects specifically that will allow increase in job growth, and that's the adjustments or under the changes in regulation on the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR, and the other one is called ITAR, which is your international trade. We have companies here that are restricted due to government regulation that needs to be removed, that I'm aware of, having worked on both sides of industry, from the government side of the table to the private sector side of the table. You need to get the acquisition reform regulations changed so governments, so as an example, a product or service that's been developed for a DoD customer or a government customer, there's restrictions on being able to sell it to private industry or sell it overseas. There's no difference between an Army medic or a Navy corpsman and a EMT or firefighter, yet there's restrictions due to government regulation that would prevent that type of training, that type of service that's been developed to be sold to a commercialization or foreign military sales or foreign commercial sales. That's my knowledge of that industry. Remove those government regulations, allow those companies to sell to their products and services into other markets.
We should probably go back to Darrell's original question for you, Mr. Oehlrich, and that's what's the most important thing you could accomplish for the district?
Well, my beliefs are limited federal government, local control of education, obviously personal control of health care. And we've just got to get the federal government out of our life because they're very inefficient. Local control, I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what the federal government adds to the education process other than money. I mean, what is it that they do that can't be replaced? Also, we have to get the president to start following the law. He can't continue to ignore laws on the books, and there's nobody up in Washington that's willing to hold him to account.
But how would this specifically help your district, and exactly what would you do in that regard? These several items you just mentioned, what kind of policies would you propose?
Well, if Florida, for instance, could opt out of the education requirements that the federal government puts on them and just take the money, I mean, that could do a lot for this district. We could pay our teachers more money if all the money wasn't wasted up in Washington. As far as I mean, Obamacare, we need to overturn that. That's a huge cost on business, and it hasn't been fully implemented yet. What happens when the employer mandate kicks in, which it should have already kicked in? We should already be feeling the pain, and if we did, I wouldn't be the only one here at this table here asking it for it to be overturned.
Well, since you brought up Obamacare, since you want to overturn it, do you have an alternative to reduce the ranks of the uninsured?
Well, if the plan was to reduce the ranks of the uninsured, why did we bring everybody into this? I mean, I want to overturn Obamacare, where the people that are paying for insurance aren't required to follow these asinine rules. As far as taking care of the uninsured, that's a whole nother thing. There's no reason why we couldn't give the uninsured an insurance card where as they make more money, that their portion of payment would increase. And not like they have a cliff right now where if you make 1 penny more, I don't know what the number is, you're off of it. I mean, there is a way to do it, but the Obamacare is not it. And Obamacare is not affordable care.
Do you think subsidies of the kind that you described for the uninsured who have in recent years numbered over 40 million would be affordable?
Can you?
Yeah, you said Obamacare is not affordable.
Mhm.
And you described an alternative that involved subsidizing care for uninsured people on a sliding scale. Do you think that would be any more affordable than Obamacare?
Well, we already have it. It is called Medicaid. We already have that process, and I don't like Medicaid either, in the form it is right now, because I mean, the GAO, $60 billion a year in waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid. How long? And that's every year. How long can we afford that? Those programs need to be privatized. People need to get vouchers for insurance and make those insurance companies compete for that business, and they will, because I mean, you have a static governmental agency or governmental group trying to govern a dynamic industry, and governments are slow, cumbersome, expensive, and politically driven. And you know, medicine, I mean, it's constantly changing, and how can government keep up with that? They can't. And the problem with government is they don't look for innovations in efficiency, where business does. I mean, I'm all for taking care of the people that need it, but I just don't like the process that they're using now.
Did you think that things were fine before Obamacare was?
No, but everyone
But
thinks
what would you have done then?
everyone thinks we had the free market system then. We didn't have the free market system. I couldn't buy insurance from anywhere. I mean, I couldn't buy insurance from Kansas because of the McCarran-Ferguson Act. It allows state governments to regulate insurance companies, and they regulate health insurance companies. So that's why you have Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida, Georgia, everywhere else. If you overturn that law, you'd have probably 4, 5, 7 national insurance companies that could make things more efficient, where you'd have like a central billing system. You would see them have open up testing centers where you just go there. The key is you want to lower the administrative costs, where most of the money goes to the doctor, the nurse, the hospital, the test, or the prescription.
Well, I guess we'll continue the discussion on Obamacare, and I'll go to Mr. Smith. What's your position on it? Do you think that Congress should leave it alone, make some changes, or repeal Obamacare?
Well, there's been 28 changes without Congress's consent since it was the beginning of implementation. I think that more people covered by health insurance, more people covered with pre-existing conditions were good ideas. I think that market solutions, free market solutions, and greater competition between insurance companies across state lines, between health groups. I don't like to say competition between doctors because so many medical practice are part of larger organizations. But there needs to be competition in healthcare, and needs to be competition between hospitals. So that's valid. But there should be a greater incentive for employers to cover the healthcare cost. They use that in terms of hiring and retaining their skilled workforce. And it doesn't have to be high-skilled workforce. You look at a company like Massey Services. Harvey Massey's never laid off an employee because he cares about the people. Or somebody like Harris Rosen. He self-insures his employees. So there are business incentives to take care of your people. And it doesn't have to be that expensive. But it requires competition. It requires businesses to be able to make informed choices, not force down their throat mandates where a healthy young male is required to, pay for birth control if he gets the one-size-fits-all. Healthcare is not one-size-fits-all, and the only way you get to really drive down the cost of healthcare, and my fundamental problem with the Affordable Health Care Act is that it did nothing to lower cost. It was about cost transfer. It's about who pays. We need comprehensive health care reform in this country. And with that's going to come tort reform. With that's going to come greater competition across state lines. With that's going to come a real incentive to reduce the cost of health care, not just who pays. It's much more complex, but the one-size-fits-all that Obamacare that's why I believe that at some point it will be tweaked and tweaked and tweaked, but it will not be repealed and replaced, and certainly until Republicans take the Senate and take the White House. But it's what you're seeing with these changes is more of the fixes that have to go in because it was fundamentally flawed from an industry perspective from the get-go, and I think it is evolving, and it'll evolve even further.
Give Mr. Shirley a chance on the subject.
Okay. Yeah, Obamacare, I think we should either repeal it or we should somehow revise it. The mandate of having the uninsured insured is great, but I mean, we've had the Medicare system. Medicare, and we have Medicaid. I've been in the industry of healthcare for 30 years. I've known it from the beginning. Things have changed over time, but Obamacare is not the solution. It is more of a problem. It's going to cost this country millions and billions, and I think the last thing I saw was $1 trillion plus. So I don't know how we can afford to do that. It's going to be, we look at the doctors, the pharmacies, and all making all the money, but that's not where the money is going. The people at the bottom, the people delivering the health care, are the ones that are paying the most. They, you just don't see it. You think, oh, everybody's, rich and things of that sort, but that's not really the case. The portion of our health care goes toward testing, over-testing, because they don't want to be sued. The prescriptions, the drug manufacturers, they raise their prices 4 times a year. It's been going on like that ever since I've been a pharmacist. Our doctors are having more regulations put on them. They can't govern their, they have to keep getting more and more staff. They're going out of business. They're tired of it. And the more we push on them the regulations of Obamacare. It's going to reduce our medical facilities. It's going to reduce our doctors. It's going to reduce the care that people are going to be getting. That's why you see like Walgreens and CVS, they're putting in these little clinics. I mean, they're trying to take away some of the burden that's being put on our doctors to help facilitate that. It's just like for me, I give out flu shots. I give out the pneumonia shot, shingles. You know, I'm doing all these other services that I never thought I'd ever do. But it's helping in some ways because people are getting care. And it's just by doing some of these things that I think that we would be better off. But I think Obamacare, we need to abolish it or at least revise it.
Well, we were just listening to your grim prognostications about what Obamacare is going to, how it's going to affect the nation. But because of your special expertise in healthcare, we're wondering what you would propose in its stead.
Well, the system we had before was not all that bad. We just needed to have maybe tort reform. We need to have insurance companies be able to go across state lines so that they can offer care. And I think that that would help with the industry in itself.
We've talked a lot about national issues, but I'd like to ask you three brief questions. Is this your first try at elected office? And what leadership experience do you have? And what sort of community service have you engaged in? Most people, especially who run for federal office, come up and have held local office or some sort of leadership positions or been engaged in nonprofits or community service. So first with you, Mr. Smith.
Okay. First time running for office, I retired from the Marine Corps 2 years ago. Community service, I sit on the board of directors of the YMCA out of the Blanchard Park as my specific facility. I sit on the board of directors of Central Florida SPCA because I'm an animal guy and have been involved with animal rescue for several years. I'm a mentor in the Camaraderie Foundation, which helps service members and their families with a PTSD issue, which is a significant problem right here in Central Florida that goes unreported a lot of times. I'm also involved with several of the veterans groups, VFW, American Legion, sit on the board of the Central Florida Marine Corps Foundation, having been the senior Marine officer in Central Florida for my last tour in the Marine Corps. That certainly gave me an opportunity to speak to a lot of groups, from Rotary clubs to Chambers of Commerce and Kiwanis and all those kind of things. So I'm very intertwined. Coalition with the Homeless I was involved with for a while. I went through Leadership Orlando, Class 78, when I first got home to Florida 5 years ago. I also went through Leadership Law, which is law for non-lawyers, run by the Bar Association. I sit on the Orange County Bar Association's Veterans Advisory Committee. I'm sure you're aware we recently stood up, October of last year, a Veterans Court for the treatment or disposition of veterans that get in a little trouble with the law. And they can get a diversion program. I've been a mentor in that program since it started. And then there's several other things besides my church. I'm a member at First Baptist Oviedo. So many veterans issues, many trade organizations, the National Center for Simulation, NTSA, National Training and Simulation Association, and NDIA is probably the umbrella organization. The National Defense Industrial Association. We have 138 companies right here in Central Florida, within 25 miles of the UCF Research Park, that do modeling, simulation, and training. Second largest economic driver in our region after tourism. So I am a part of those trade organizations and several other nonprofits. And the leadership comes back to 30 years in the United States Marine Corps, multiple promotions, 6 deployments overseas, combat tour in Iraq, flying helicopter pilot my entire career. But it also having an undergraduate and graduate degrees in business management, and starting in 1997, started down what they call the acquisition professional corps in the part of the Marine Corps. I was one of the first officers selected for that track. There's statutory requirements for military or civilians to manage certain dollar thresholds. I've managed 3 separate billion-dollar organizations, hands-on business experience. And by doing that, I got to manage a lot of money, a lot of people.
We want to
Okay, sorry.
give Mr. Oehlrich.
Community-wise, I'm past chairman of the Arnold Palmer Invitational that benefits the Arnold Palmer Hospital and the Winnie Palmer Hospital. I've been associated with the tournament for 21 years. My wife and I, we coached middle school and girls lacrosse, middle school and high school girls lacrosse. She says that none of this can scare us because we coach middle school girls lacrosse. Been involved with the Girl Scouts, working as the kitchen director for their camporees. Been involved with fundraising for Anchor House in Auburndale. We're members of the Valencia Foundation. My wife's a professor with Valencia. Gosh.
And this is your first time running for office?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Shirley?
Yes, as far as leadership goes, I was a director of pharmacy for Gooding's Supermarket back in when I was 30. I developed 14 of their stores. I designed, I managed, wrote the contracts. I did everything for them. I started my own small business back when I was 11, and I worked 7 days a week, 365 days a year for 5 years. I've always been a hard worker. I work very hard. I try to lead my people. I work at Walgreens, and I've been a manager with them for over 20 years. I've worked with the, I worked not only in hospital, HMOs, I helped Publix get started in their pharmacy a long time ago. And since then, we wrote some new laws for Maitland. I got together with the sheriff, the attorney, the mayor. We had some bad drug things going on in our community. And so I went before the city council, and we got some laws changed there to help our community and get rid of the drug problems that we were having in that area. We have like 13 to 17 people a day dying from overdoses right now in this in the state of Florida. I've always led. It's been my nature, and I don't know what else to say at
Okay,
this
well,
point.
that's fine. We'll move on to another question,
Thanks.
kind of a general question. We'll start at this end of the table. You'll need to make a case to voters in this primary that they will be better served in replacing a senior member of the U.S. House. They'll be better served with you representing the district than a senior member of the U.S. House. How do you make that case?
Well, if the voters want somebody that just brings in stuff, brings in light rail, brings in this and that, well, they're not going to vote for me. If they want a change in leadership, if they want to replace somebody like John Boehner with some newer people that will actually move forward the Republican ideals of limited federal government, well, then I'm the person they need to vote for, because as long as he's been in there, it hasn't gotten any better. It's gotten worse. I mean, we've made no progress, and they've been in control for all but 4 of the last 20 years. So they have no excuse. They even had the White House for 6 years. So, but if people are just interested in a rail system or something like that, well, they're not going to vote for me. But the people that want true change in Washington, they're the ones that are going to vote for me.
Sure.
Yes, I think that John Mica's been there for quite some time. It's been 22 years. I think it's time for a change. I think people should vote for me just because I have a diverse background. I talk to people every single day. I think I have a handle on what people want and what people need. I see our seniors really struggling. I see our millennials struggling. And I think that truth and honesty is what I bring to the table. I'm not a usual politician, but I think that I have the utmost integrity to move forward and move our country forward to be better. And I think that it's just time for changing.
Well, Mr. Shirley, is your qualm with Mr. Mica simply the fact that he's been in office for 22 years, or is there some specific failing that you're trying to address by running for office?
Well, one of the things that a lot of people are very upset with the rail system. It's costing the communities quite a bit of money. And just for instance, the arms that go down on the system there for the roads, they cost $400,000. And it's a big struggle for these communities to take up that burden of cost.
Didn't their representatives, though, their city governments approve light rail for stops to be made there?
Commuter rail.
Commuter
Well,
rail.
it kind of got pushed on them a little bit. And so it happened.
Oh.
But and then the other thing that happened was that whenever John Mica voted for the sequestration, it took away some of the benefits for our Vietnam vets, or our vets, our military veterans, and I think that was not in their best interest.
Now, the sequestration, just in dollar terms, is one of the most significant cases of deficit reduction in the last few years in Washington. Would you not have wanted to voted to reduce the deficit if you were in Congress at the time?
I think the sequestration was advantageous. It was the other things that were added in there that caused so many problems for the people. And I think that reducing our government is definitely a good thing. We need to reduce the regulations that we have. We need to reduce the overseeing that the government is doing with everyone. It's just like, when we were talking about Obamacare. I mean, think about it. If the government knows everything that we're doing, and say you have cancer, it's just going to be like when you get a ticket. You're going to have mailings coming to your home saying, we're going to, help you with your, because people are going to be vying for your health care. And I think that our health care is one of the most sacred things we have, as a person. That's the most individual thing that we have, besides our freedom.
Okay, let's give Mr. Smith a chance to answer the question, which was, why would the district be better served by you as a freshman Republican than as a senior member of the Republican majority in the House?
Right. Elections are about the future. Light rail is here. The airport expansion is funded. Wekiva Parkway is underway. I-4 is going to be refurbished over some number of years. John should be leaving office with head held high. Central Florida needs to strengthen and diversify its economy. It's going to take new leadership and somebody with a vision for the future that understands high technology. understands the simulation and training, understands laser technology, understands manufacturing, to move Central Florida forward. Our future is not based on our past. It's time for a leadership change, somebody with my experience. Specifically, I'll tell you what has John not done? And that's put an emphasis on the 84,000 veterans that live in the 7th Congressional District. Our hospital to service those veterans is 3 years behind schedule. I wish he would have made that a priority instead of Sunrail. You know, it's over $150 million over budget because of delays. And it's the lack of attention, the lack of oversight. And John sits on the oversight committee. So now, and it's not only those veterans, it's a little over, it's like 2.3 people, other than the veteran, those veterans' family members that are affected also. So the number of veterans and those veterans' family members take up almost 20% of the people in Central Florida. Yet John doesn't have a single person on his staff that is focused on veterans' issues.
So he bears the burden solely for the delay in the VA hospital?
No. What he should have been was a watchdog on that project. It was off track before the first shovel of dirt was thrown in the air. And somebody who had a knowledge of government contracting and a knowledge of what they were trying to do, like I do, would have seen that from the start and been a watchdog and sounding the alarm to take corrective action early. Because time in construction, time is money. The longer these things drag out, the more they cost. And then it seems like John just woke up that we have this many veterans in the district that have problems. And in particular, the number of young veterans that are, as the services draw down their numbers, they're coming home to Florida. And there's veterans in Michigan and upstate New York and Pennsylvania that don't want to go through the polar vortex, or as we used to call it, winter, and they're moving to Central Florida at a rate of about 3% growth per year planned up through 2022. Then it'll start declining because of Vietnam veterans dying off. So we have to have more attention on veterans, and in particular young veterans who will be in the VA healthcare system for another 40 or 50 years. And what's made that even more egregious for the lack of attention to detail is the number of women veterans. People today have no idea how many women are in uniform. The VA has never, ever been set up to handle women's health care issues. And now they're coming home with PTSD problems. And now they have a couple of kids. And that's affecting families. And it's veterans' issues is way more than just that Vietnam veteran you see sitting around Lake Eola with the sign saying, hungry, and with their hand out. This is a pervasive and growing crisis, and it's been one that John has not focused near enough attention on. He's not a veteran. And he says he's for veteran issues, yet he voted for the Murray Ryan budget that cut the pay of combat wounded medically retired veterans. That's a vote I would not have cast based on principle.
So principle would trump any savings physically? I mean, there's, this is a real issue, and we've talked about that,
absolutely.
or you've talked about it.
There's got to be a balance, but the problem with that, and why I would not have voted that specifically, veterans in that bill were targeted. This was not, all government retirees. This was only military retirees were subject to that COLA freeze, which is essentially a pay cut. For an officer that retires, that was $134,000. For an enlisted soldier, that was $84,000. In Central Florida, that's real money. So I would not have specifically targeted veterans' benefits. That to me, while we are still a nation at war, and that vote is unconscionable to me, with troops in the field.
Well, let's move on to another issue. One that's been hot lately is minimum wage, federal minimum wage. And we're wondering, Mr. Oehlrich, would you vote to increase the federal minimum wage?
Well, actually, you guys have printed an op-ed that I did on minimum wage. As a matter of fact, I have it right with me. First of all, I don't think the federal government has any business in setting a minimum wage. We have state governments that can set any minimum wage they want. They've set one in Seattle, the local government. And I think that the minimum wage hurts the people worse that people think are going to benefit the most. Because you set a minimum wage, you're going to see businesses in the poorer communities have to shut down. Because it won't affect the more affluent areas because they're already paying more than minimum wage. So the people that it's supposed to help the most don't benefit. But Florida has their own minimum wage. So I don't know why the federal government needs to be involved in it.
Mr. Shirley?
Yes, I think that state-run minimum wage is the way to go. I don't think that we should raise the minimum wage. It hurts small businesses in every way, in every sense of the spectrum. If we have minimum wage, I worked for minimum wage at one time, and I was young, and it didn't matter how much money I was making. You either save it or you don't, or you spend it or you don't.
What about older people who now work for minimum wage in several jobs where they earn a minimum wage?
Sometimes they're happy with that. Sometimes people would like to volunteer. They don't even really care about the wage. They enjoy helping their community. I mean, I think that, for instance, the bag boys at Publix, maybe they're making actually a little bit better than minimum wage. And that helps the economy. But, it should be up to the individual business, and it should be state-run.
Finally, Mr. Smith?
I think the Davis-Bacon Act, which ensures government contracts, mostly construction contracts, is put in place for a good reason to ensure that prevailing wages are paid fairly on those government contracts. I would not have been in favor of it had it come to Congress for just an across-the-board all federal government contracts at minimum. I don't think that's the role of the federal government. I think there's other provisions there, like the Davis-Bacon Act. It didn't need to be. The president didn't need to act independently.
I think we're just about out of time, but I want to hear relatively succinct answers from everybody on what you think the government should be doing about the current crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. Let's start with you, Mr. Smith.
I think we have to immediately address the humanitarian crisis and ensure that there's no loss of life and that people are taken care of. It's really two separate issues. It's the humanitarian one, and then it's the immigration one. And I think the immigration solution has to be done in partnership with Mexico. Many of those Central American people were given transit visas to come through Mexico to get to our border. That puts Mexico on the hook for a portion of the solution. But most of those people need to be returned to their country of origin because they were misled to come to the United States thinking that whether it's the DREAM Act or some other legislation was going to allow them to stay. They were misled, and they need to be returned home so those families can get back together. But it is two separate issues. Humanitarian crisis that was man-made, but we have to address it. And then the immigration piece, which requires Mexico's participation.
Quick follow-up, because you mentioned the DREAM Act. As you're probably aware, the DREAM Act, which was not passed by Congress, but a portion of it was imposed by the president through an executive order. But one of the groups that's included in the DREAM Act is people who have served in the military. So I'm curious whether or not, if you had been in Congress, you would have supported the DREAM Act.
No.
Okay. Mr. Shirley, go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I think that the immigration problem down there in the southern borders there, I think that we need to first secure our border. I think it's utmost urgent that we do it. We need to stop these people from coming across the Rio Grande. I think that the people that are down there, they're trying to do the best they can, but they need more help. The people coming across these borders are from South America and Mexico, and the cartels are making money on this. This is a business for them. And they're endangering children and women and young men to come across these borders. And I think that we need to send these people back. We need to be humanitarian in a way, you know, take care of their problems that they have, maybe their diseases and things of that sort, but send them back to their country of origin.
The president needs to do his job. He needs to secure the border, and he needs to pressure Mexico into securing their end of the border. I mean, anybody who thinks that everyone is going across except Al-Qaeda is living in a dream world. The president needs to do his job and secure that border.
Any concluding questions, Jerry?
Yeah, I guess I just had one. Since Congress has been castigated for gridlock, I'm wondering what priorities do you have that you would expect would draw bipartisan support if you were elected to office? And I guess we closed with you before. I'm going to go to the middle, Mr. Shirley.
Okay, repeat that question
Yes,
again?
simply, what priorities do you have if you were elected to office that you would expect would draw bipartisan support?
One of the things that I would like to be able to do as a bipartisan would be to help our seniors. We have drug companies that give out vouchers that help people acquire medication, but people on Medicare are not allowed to use them. This would not only reduce part of our deficit, it would also help seniors with their ability to not get to the gap. You know, they talk about the spending gap. And that would help toward that, and it would help our seniors out. I would like to see a bipartisan on something of that sort.
Mr. Smith?
We have one of the greatest concentrations of veterans in the United States right here in Central Florida. I think that's certainly an issue that would be addressing veterans issues up in Washington would be certainly something that gets bipartisan support, but would have a tremendous impact right here in Central Florida to affect those veterans and those veterans' family members. So that's what I would like to see.
And finally, Mr. Oehlrich?
Well, bipartisan support requires the other side to give in too. And we don't see Harry Reid giving in to anything. I mean, he won't even vote for issues to protect his own people. The president, rather than going to Congress to negotiate any changes with Obamacare, he just doesn't follow the law. He just does what he wants. So any bipartisan solutions for anything have to be both-sided. I mean, on both sides. And there is no movement on the other side.
All right, I think we'll wrap it up. We appreciate everyone coming in.
Thank you.
Good luck in your campaigns.
Thank you.